I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The last man on Earth is over. You're freaks. I'm a man. The last man.
Almost as good as Vincent Price.
Hey, I really tried to bring it some Sound of Music. She's Grigita. I'm Berduga. Boo boo. That was what I was going for. I don't know if you got that, but now that I've said it.
Well, now that you said it, I hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you ever seen this movie?
No, this was my pick. And as you recall, when I did my picks, I chose my entire list was films I had never seen before. So I had only seen the other two adaptations of I Am Legend and The Omega Man, which we covered in our disease film series. And then, of course, the 2007 film I Am Legend with Will Smith, directed by Francis Lawrence. So I had seen those, and I had heard that this was the best adaptation of the bunch, even if it wasn't as good an adaptation. And so I was curious to check this one out. And so hence I kind of took that, the impetus with having discussed the Omega Man. I figured why not turn it into a series? And now we have the I Am Legend series. Here we are talking about The Last Man on Earth. And so this was my first time watching it.
Mine too. And yeah. I'm very surprised that I haven't seen this movie, because even if you don't come to this movie by way of your fanaticism for I Am Legend, I don't know who you are, if that's your fan jam, no judgment. If
you're saying the book or the film,
it doesn't matter. The I Am Legend universe, fictional universe, that this movie is such a seems like such a seminal visual work for just zombie films in general, not even vampire films, but the tropes that come before Night of the Living Dead is crazy to me that I hadn't heard or seen this movie.
Yeah, that was and that's a big part of the book too, right? Where and it's credited as being George Romero pulled a lot from it for Night of the Living Dead. It's very different from what you're getting from a vampire story like Bram Stoker's Dracula, things like that. This is the film that really, or the story that really kicked off this idea of a post-apocalyptic scenario where you're trying to survive amongst a huge horde of these kind of undead, sorts of creatures. And the book is very, they're definitely creatures that have vampiric tendencies. They, don't like sunlight. I can't remember in the book if they don't like mirrors, they don't like garlic. I think that's the case in the book as well. But it's definitely a thing where you have to, they're pulling so much of that vampire type of element from it, yet at the same time, it really feels like a zombie apocalypse. And I think that's a really interesting element that the book kind of created. And I think they, for the most part, do a pretty good job telling that story here.
Yeah, I think so too. I had a good time with it, even though, watching it so many years later feels like a history lesson a little bit. It has all of the things that I want in a zombie movie, much more a zombie movie than a vampire movie. These vampires are terrible at their job. They're just bad at it. And I think that's why it's so much easier to see it as a zombie movie. And I feel like the characters in the movie, even calling these creatures vampires, don't know what vampires are. That's what I couldn't resist laughing at them, because they keep saying vampire, and I don't think it means what you think it means, right? Like these are zombies.
Yeah, well, and it is interesting because, and I did look, in the book they have a deathly aversion to garlic. They can't look at themselves in mirrors, so there is a lot of stuff that definitely feels pulled from vampire lore, but it is treated as like a zombie apocalypse. So. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting blending of things. Oh, and the other thing that's interesting about it is it takes a very scientific approach. It's not just a bite on the neck and you have this mysterious disease that now turns you into a vampire. Like, they're looking into the bacillus and trying to figure out, like, what is this thing that is causing, like, we have multiple times where Vincent Price is looking through his microscope at these cells, trying to figure out what he's looking at and what these bacteria are doing and how they're reacting and interacting with other cells. And that is another new thing for this particular story that Richard Matheson had written, that they're taking a scientific approach to the logic behind how this disease came to be. And in the scope of vampire films, that does also feel kind of new. Although it's interesting because when it comes to the zombie films, George Romero really kind of took the whole thing of like, we don't need an explanation. It's just the dead are rising from their graves. And that kind of, and you know, the people are debating all these reasons on TV and stuff, but there's really no reason ever given as to why they're doing it. They're just doing it. And so,
right. It's like a lesson in allowing the audience to have those same debates, which is really fun, right? That's a really fun exercise. This one is interesting. And I think where the movie comes up just a little short for me is that it's a little short for me. If I remember, I don't think Robert in the book was a scientist. No. I think we covered this, right? He wasn't a scientist. He was just like a working guy, like a schlub. And over the years, he taught himself biology and virology to understand whatever the plague was. I thought that was really cool. And the shortcut that this movie takes by making Dr. Robert Morgan, the scientist, I think actually is it's too much of a shortcut for the film. Yeah. I felt like so much of the first two acts of the movie, as society is declining, I already got it. Like, I think I'd be more excited about spending more time with him, learning the stuff he needs to learn to be able to combat the Walking Dead, right? The vampires. And we don't get that because he's already kind of a scientific superhero. Did that hit you at all? It just felt short, like it was missing meat.
Yeah, well, I think that's there. I mean, they definitely took shortcuts with the story. And I mean, it's AIP producing this, so we know we're getting into something that's going to be pretty low budget as far as just kind of the entire tone and the way that they approach it, right? Because that's kind of like what AIP is known for. And
the entire third act of the movie, Andy, it feels like the camera people are being chased by predators.
Yeah, right. No kidding. Well, and they filmed it in Italy, and that was another thing. Like, they went over to Italy to do it because, again, low budget. They're looking for ways to do this on the cheap. So the fact that it comes in just under 90 minutes, it definitely feels like something that could have used a little more breathing room to really kind of tell the story more completely and give us a better, fuller picture of the book, because the book is brilliant and the book takes on a lot of these interesting subjects, but in a way where it might take a little more time to do, because again, we're following an isolated man by himself. Now the book it's a book, so it's much easier to get into his internal thinking and plotting through that stuff. Unfortunately, with the film, we really are burdened with some pretty terrible narration as we kind of move through the story, which definitely doesn't help things at all. But I don't know. I think that had they given the film, like, made it 2 hours even, just given it a little more time to really allow us to kind of figure out some of the elements of the story, I think it could have worked so much better. Like, one of the other things is, like, in the book, there is this angle to, figuring out, like, the whole idea of killing these people, killing the infected in their sleep, right? In this film, it is just seen like there's nothing moralistic ever thought about with it at all. It's never depicted as something that he has to debate about. Is this right? Is this wrong? It's just a survival tactic. It's just something he does where he's just going about his business and just hammering stakes through the chests of these people. In the book, I think they do a better job of presenting it where he's thinking about the ethics of these tactics, and is this actually the right thing to do, which actually comes into play later in the story after he meets Ruth and starts going through the whole process of figuring out that there's more to these people, to these quote monsters, than he had at first thought.
Well, and that's it. Like all of the sort of the morality tale of his experience only comes at the end when he finds out
Exactly.
that he's been killing people too long. So I agree. I just feel like that's almost not enough, because the book was richer in exploration of his sort of psychological state, his like I mean, I think he was an alcoholic and he was deeply horny. Like those are the things that I remember. Like he just really, being alone is hard, and I think that's missing in this very short film.
Yeah.
So
this film starts with he wakes up and he's got a great line when he wakes up for the first time, like in this film. As you know, we've already kind of had this tour of the city, of everything empty, quiet, bodies. Then we start seeing bodies laying on the ground, and we come to his place as his alarm clock goes off, and he gets up and he just starts going about his business. And that's kind of what we get is we get a depiction of him as this solitary figure in a desolate world, and we're just kind of like watching him on his daily routines. It's really not too hard. I'm almost out of gas. Well, I guess I got to not deal with all these dead bodies right now because I got to get gas. Like it plays as just very step-by-step process, and there's only a few moments where, like, I think there's one part where he suddenly is really distraught about the state of things, and he like throws his coffee cup across the room. And then like that's the extent of it, because he goes, I can't afford to get angry. And he just goes and like picks it up and gets back to work. I'm like, oh, okay. So that's the extent of psychological exploration in this film.
Yeah. He's quite a stoic. Yeah. Meanwhile, like, let's just say what's going on. Like he sleeps, and works during the day, and he does manage to get some Z's at night, because the Walking Dead vampire zombies are like, they could not, like, really, you hear that phrase, they couldn't get out of a wet paper bag. Like this movie was just slightly adjacent to zombies trying to get out of a wet paper bag and failing. Like his house is not made defensible. Like they're breaking through every time, and he's so chill inside his house.
It made no sense to me, because
I know.
I mean, it's just part of the way that they chose to tell this story. Like he's got a few pieces of wood over the windows. He's got a piece of wood holding his door shut and his garage shut. Like there's like very little protective work that he's put into really fortifying his place. Yet when he falls asleep at his wife's tomb, and he comes home late at night. It's the middle of the night. All these zombie vampires are already wandering around, and he kind of pushes them to the side. And I mean, it's very easy to get past these things. It's just no struggle at all. And he gets back into his house, but he leaves his car out. We see these zombies like ripping the engine to pieces. They pull an entire seat like out of the car. Like they clearly, when they are given the aptitude per the script, they're quite capable of destruction. It's just because they want to create this house as a fortified place, they suddenly become, per the script, very weak in actually accomplishing anything. And that was just like, it was per the script, and it makes it that much weaker that it's done that way.
I love the car destruction it was practically out of Sicario. It was like a drug search at the border. It was so funny. Like the cut to the zombie carrying the seat.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Like, did you see it when you were making the movie? Did you notice what they were doing? Because it does not play over the years. It does not play. And yet there are so many things in this movie that I think really, really work well. And I'll just say the cinematography I thought was really fun. The black and white is haunting. I don't know how much of it was intentional or how much I'm sort of putting on it because the vibe is so, haunted. But I did feel like the look of the film was really great. I think you were a real Sherlock Holmes to be able to find both the widescreen black and white version on Amazon Prime, because, everywhere else you get it either, 4:3 black and white or widescreen colorized.
Right.
And I did watch a bit of the colorized, and I thought it was fine.
Yeah,
but it was definitely not as intense as the black and white, which I thought was great, and it fit Vincent Price for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think that there's just be careful, out there when you're watching this, because the cropped version black and white that you see on like Hoopla, which is like your local library, and you'll notice, because at the beginning, instead of American International Pictures, it says American International Television, and it is cropped 4:3, and so you're watching a black and white cropped version if you see that credit at the front. Otherwise, just watch for that widescreen black and white version. Amazon Prime had it, and it looked pretty good. And what's interesting about this, because they filmed this in Italy, you can find it credited as being directed by two people. Sidney Salkow and Ubaldo B. Ragona are the two credited directors. But if you watch the English version, you're only seeing Sidney Salkow. If you watch the Italian version, which you can find on YouTube, and I'll put a link in the show notes of the Italian version, you'll see that it's directed by Ubaldo B. Ragona. Largely, it's the same film, but interestingly, aside from obviously like the dub is different, you're listening to the kind of Italian language dub throughout, but they do have some actually longer scenes, some longer conversations. Like in a flashback, there's a longer conversation that he has with his wife. I believe there's a longer conversation with Ruth later in the film. Also just places where there's like English language, like you see like the name of the institute where he works, they've put a different shot in, translated into Italian. And so you do see stuff where they've cut stuff out just because it's in English. But largely, you are looking at essentially two similar but different cuts of the film. So, it could be an interesting way to kind of experience it by checking out the Italian version and seeing what that one feels like.
It's the ultimate Mandela effect movie. You never know which version you're talking about. Was the Italian version, were the Italian actors dubbed? I know in the English version, everybody but Vincent Price was dubbed pretty much.
Well, the Italian version is the English version. It's all English actors and everything. Like, it's the exact same film. It's just Italian voiceover artists coming in to dub Vincent Price.
There's a lot of weird dubbery going on around this period.
Italy always comes in and dubs things after the fact anyway. That's generally their production style. So, but it's, I don't know. I mean, in the scope of isolation, loneliness, we've talked about that a little bit. I guess a big part of the story, though, is kind of the nature of humanity, and that's definitely worth talking about in the scope of this as it compares to the book, perhaps the other films as well. Obviously, the book, you have these vampiric humans, I'll just say, that they do kind of act like vampires, but they have a little more of their retained human qualities to them. And it builds to that end where he realizes, as he's talking to Ruth, who, as over the course of the story, he finds out she is actually one of this new society of these creatures. And he has been going around killing these people that are actually building a society. It's a different type of person. And he is put on trial at the end of the film, or at the end of the book. And Ruth, who, he has kind of saved her, and she acknowledges that he's a good person at heart, she gives him like an actual suicide pill to kill himself. And so he takes that as he's up on the stand, and they're finding him guilty and all this sort of stuff. But he sees, as he looks out of his window, women and children and all these people looking up at him and pointing at him like, there he is, there's the monster. And that's the whole point. He realizes, I've become that monster. I've become that legend that people talk about late at night when they're telling stories to their kids. Like, that's kind of the whole crux of it. And so you're getting this fascinating, complex story about this man who kind of has become the monster in the eyes of this new society. And I just, I mean, how does it play for you, this portrayal in this film? We're getting kind of these infected people that are kind of moving zombie-like, particularly Ben, who's always outside the house calling for him and everything. But I mean, as far as how it's depicting kind of humanity, defined by what? Biological status? Is it defined by the social behavior that we're seeing? How does that work for you in this film?
Well, I think both. And I think that's one of the things that makes the movie and the story, in fact, I think work really well, is when these stories commit to that piece where slowly but surely you are being essentially converted to the experience of watching our hero become the antagonist. That's the sleight of hand that this movie is able to, or the story is able to pull off. The degree to which this movie pulls it off, I think it does. I think it's successful. I think it's hampered by what we were talking about earlier, that there isn't quite enough meat on the bones of this principal character and his evolution. But his ultimate realization that he's been killing otherwise sentient, not mindless beings, it's as powerful as it needs to be. The fact that we have both this sort of medical, not racism, but we have this biological, reinforcement of, divides and the social construct that he doesn't understand how anything that moves or sounds like, these things could possibly ever transcend their experience with the aid of some other medicine, is a great reflection of humanity, right? Humanity and lessons we've never learned, right? We just went through the pandemic and we're still dealing with this stuff, right?
Yeah,
some of
right.
these same constructs, and I think that's the thing that is most interesting to reflect on about this movie is the way it pits you against your own instincts.
I think for me, I mean, I agree with your points. I think that, and especially in the book, I mean, this is such a great book. I just have to reiterate how much I am a fan of this book and what Matheson did here. I think the part of the story that I struggle with, or the film story that I struggle with, is the way that they kind of decided to say, okay, Ben, who's out in front of the house, and these other kind of people that, every morning he's waking up and he says they're feeding on their weak. And that's why he's got all these dead bodies strewn every morning, new dead bodies everywhere that he has to pick up, stake through the heart, go toss into that pit of fire that he's kind of been keeping up. That I'm not sure how that works for me as far as like the I don't know, this evolution that we're meant to see within the society of these are the I'm trying to remember. I think in the book it's the people who had died and come back are kind of these sorts of zombie sorts of creatures, whereas the people who just got sick and didn't die, they're the ones who are the more cognizant ones that are working to kind of create this society. And I struggle to feel like the film does a great job of creating that separation between these two groups, because Ruth, I mean, I guess it's there, but at the same time, they just so blatantly just feel like they're just making like zombie creatures.
Well, and they don't ever give us a perspective of the zombie creature's new civilization beyond Ruth. And the fact that Ruth has to take some sort of an injection to maintain her sanity makes any civilization that they're trying to build, any claim that there is some future, more fragile. Because what happens when you commit to this new future and you don't have this medication that she has to take? So I think that's an area where the book falls short. I'll double down on what we were saying earlier. I would have loved more of the movie to commit to him learning to be a scientist than his workaday being going and picking up a new car and taking bodies to the dump. Like I just, that's a more interesting angle than more of that sort of apocalypse porn.
Yeah, I think that's one of my struggles with it. And also just like, I gotta say, like Vincent Price, I generally usually enjoy quite a bit, but I really just kind of felt he was a little bit over the top for this sort of story. Like he just, he has kind of a hammy tendency, and sometimes I just really enjoy that. But in this particular story, I just felt like, I just don't feel like he was really bringing the right energy for it. Like he didn't have, like when we were talking about kind of that stoicism, I'm like, I don't know if I buy that with Vincent Price. Like he just kind of comes across as like so performative in the way that he's putting stuff on. And so I struggled with Vincent Price as my lead character. And I read after the fact, after I watched it and already had this, I was like, oh, okay. I'm not alone. Robert Matheson had this, or Richard Matheson had this same issue with Vincent Price. What's funny is there was initial conversations to actually have Fritz Lang direct this instead of Sidney Salkow. And that was the actual plan. And Matheson was like, that's great. They changed it to Sidney Salkow, and his quote is, well, there's a bit of a drop. And Sidney Salkow's a big director, but a lot of the stuff, and I mean, many, many films. It's not like he hasn't directed more. He's done more than 50 films, but he's also the guy who did a lot of TV episodes like Lassie, The Addams Family, The Cisco Kid, things like that, that I don't know. I just feel like he's very much kind of a studio director who's just there to kind of like capture the stuff without any particular sense of style. And I think Fritz Lang could have done something really interesting with this.
Well, I agree on all those points, but where I push back a little bit is on Vincent Price. I think I enjoy Vincent Price in this film because it's kind of his most un-Vincent Pricey portrayal that I've seen, especially as we've been watching him in some of these earlier horror films, because I feel like he's struggling as a performer not to be the Gothic horror actor, right? And watching him kind of pull back and watching him try to assemble garlic leaves and dispose of corpses, like he's doing it with the kind of emotional intensity of someone doing their grocery shopping. And I think that actually plays for me. I don't think his voiceover doesn't work because I don't like it as a film artifact. I think the movie would be better in this case with no voiceover. But what we do get is a vocal performance of bone weariness that I do find I like, right? I enjoy the way he's portrayed as this kind of weary, exhausted character. So on the point of it, I totally get your point, and I think I may be looking at this movie with Vincent Price colored glasses just because it's different and not the theatrical arch villain that we've seen. I do think it's incredibly classy that he makes his steaks on a lathe. As you know, as my friend, one of my deep loves on the internet is slow motion lathe videos on YouTube. So when he pulled out that lathe, I was like, I need to just relax into this for a while because this is good. I'm going to do some rewinding.
What was a little disappointing with his lathe work is that I will say he's very consistent with the way that all of his steaks look. But I was like, come on, throw a little flair into your steaks. Like do something a little more interesting with them.
Like you have the tools right there. Let's do some engraving. Let's do some ribbing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. I absolutely agree with that. And the movie does not accurately convey. This is going to be one of those very deep cut critiques. The movie does not accurately convey what his lathe workshop would look like. He would not be able to breathe because he's doing all this unmasked, and it would be a disaster of wood filings
everywhere. Yeah,
just a mess, and we do not get that at all. So
yeah, right. Yeah, no kidding. Well, he probably is using those to like throw into the pit just as extra fuel for the fire.
Sure.
All the wood shavings. So
sure, he's an ecologist.
Yeah.
He's trying to environmentalist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My last note that I had with this is just looking at this as a reflection. I mean, the book came out in 1954, so post World War II, and I just have to think that there is an element that Matheson had writing this of kind of like the existential fears of kind of like nuclear war, biological warfare, all these things that had happened were being talked about during World War II. And as far as that goes, kind of creating this world where a person is trying to survive in this post-apocalyptic world where society is kind of like broken down. I mean, does it play for you? Do you feel like, especially recent, like, this was 64 when the film came out. So like, 20 years later, that it's doing a good job of kind of playing into people's fears of kind of that psychology of surviving in aftermath of something like that?
Wow, it's an interesting point because it does, I think, allow us to focus on the power of adaptation after horror. And one thing I notice, it's sort of adjacent to this question, which I just want to get out while I'm thinking about it, is that this movie ultimately, I think, suggests, or the story as depicted is ultimately suggests that adaptation and not resistance is the key to survival in this new world, right? And
Yeah.
I think that challenges really typical kind of, I'll say, American narratives of individualistic heroism that we get that dominate the post-apocalyptic stories. And this is one of those movies that force us to reckon with the fact that Vincent Price becomes the evildoer in this thing because of his efforts to be individualistically heroic. And so
Yeah.
I that's an interesting mirror to look into, right? When we're at our very best, it's when we're working together. It's when we're lifting each other up. And that's what these other species, right? These other,
Right. Yeah.
people are trying to do to raise each other up in the face of the nasty, heroic Vincent Price. And that, I think, is a reflection that I want to watch these post-apocalyptic movies through that lens, because all of these movies that have, big heroes, maybe, the best ones really are the ones that showcase, working together. It's all about Independence Day.
Teamwork.
Yeah.
Everybody do their share. Yeah.
Right.
I think that's an interesting element to think about with the story as far as like survival in this particular type of environment. And yeah, the whole idea of evolution and what if things evolved past us and we become the thing that is a remnant that needs to be eliminated in order for the better evolved new to survive, I think that's actually a really interesting and kind of off-putting way of thinking about things.
I think that's really true. The other thing that comes up with this movie around the race of scientific discovery is this movie is essentially the race between VHS and Betamax. Vincent Price is Betamax. Everybody else is VHS. It's a subpar system that they're all willing to live with because it's out there.
Yeah.
And yet the better platform is it exists in the hands of this one guy, and ultimately his science failed him. It failed to reach at any sort of critical mass, and so we're stuck with VHS zombies. That's what I'm saying. It makes sense. You think that's you're laughing at me, but that makes sense.
I'm laughing because you weirdly found like a perfect metaphor for the story. Last thing I would have thought of, but there it is. It's really boils down to the VHS Betamax debate. Here it is.
This is the zombie format war. This is the original one. And I think it's interesting because it allows scientific discovery to be at the fore of both platforms, right? They somehow, this group, we don't see it happen, but they were pro-science because they found the injectable that allowed them to survive, even at a less sort of palatable state. This was not a movie where ignorance prevails in any way, right? This is a movie where science prevails. It's just the wrong science.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. I like that.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think that's why the story, even if the films never quite completely work for me, but it's why that story, the original Matheson story, works so well and is so compelling and is definitely something worth looking into and reading. How would you rank them? You've seen all three of the versions now, right?
Yeah, the versions are Omega Man, which is last.
No, Omega Man's middle. Legend. I am Legend.
No, I'm saying last. In my ranking.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Omega Man's last. I'll tell you that of the variants of this movie of this adaptation, I'll put this one as number one. Because I think it is most allegiant to the story. I'll put Will Smith's I Am Legend as number two because I think that, ironically, with all the sort of complaints we may have about that movie, the actual world building and the universe building of the movie I thought were really fun. And I love the environment, the sets, it just looked really good. Whatever you think about Will Smith, I think the movie looks
great. Or the vampire creatures.
Or the vampire creatures. But I think the setup of the movie is really great. And then Omega Man, because it's Omega Man. Come on.
Yeah. That's where I would put it, too. And it's funny, because Richard Matheson was alive long enough to see all three versions of this, and he said that this was his favorite adaptation as well. What's funny, though, is he had enough problems with it once he saw it that he pulled his name from it. Then because they said, well, the only way you're going to get any residuals from it is if your name's on it in some form, he actually went by a pseudonym, Logan Swanson, which was his mother-in-law's last name and his mother's maiden name put together. And so that's what he was credited by on this, as Logan Swanson. So he did get credited. He did get his residuals, but yeah.
Let me just ask you a theoretical sort of, I have a thinking question. What is it about vacant cities that continues to fascinate us? When I'm thinking about that ranking, the whole reason I like I Am Legend is because I think it captures the vacant cityscape in a way that's most compelling. But I love the streets of Rome empty. I love why do we come back here to this particular trope so much? It feels like there are specific anxieties that are conjured by the image of really empty urban areas that tap into some sort of collective consciousness. Do you feel that?
Yeah, and I think you can see it in a lot of different films, even some of the films that we talked about in our member pre-show chat, where we were talking about survivalist films, but like Oblivion, you have that with kind of the future world where they're walking around. You definitely get that in like The Road or any of those sorts of stories where Book of Eli, people are walking through these places. Another one is like The Night of the Comet, where the two girls are walking around the city, and everyone's gone. There's something off-putting about being in a place that you just expect there to be a lot of people, and just to find it so empty. It's like a haunted house, right? You're kind of walking through, and it puts you in a place where you're listening for any little noise, and you're like, was that creak? Is that a person? And you're trying to look around, like it's just not what it is normally kind of depicted as. And so it does throw you off because it's a place that you expect humanity to be thriving in.
Yeah, there is that sense of your relationship to the scale of the unknown, right? Like if I'm alone in a house and I hear a creak, there's some degree of anxiety. If I'm standing in the middle of Times Square and I see countless windows of rooms that are presumably empty and nobody on the street around me, that the ratio of my anxiety to unknown goes way up, right? I there's that sense of uncertainty. I think it's weirdly the same vibe that we get when we say, why is it important for us to know as human beings that we're not alone in the universe? Because the scale of our identity to what we don't know is is so vast. So in this movie, like, and I think in horror movies in general, if isolation is the true horror, not the bumbling zombies who, do drug raids on your car, what does that tell us about fundamental human nature, right? And I think that's the thing. Are we more afraid of monsters or of being truly, utterly alone?
Yeah,
that's the humanity that I think we get to think about with this story, and that allows it to really play for me.
Which, I mean, just going back to the original story, I think the original story does a much better job of actually depicting him as somebody who is alone, who is struggling with that idea of like going through depression and trying to figure out like how to continue surviving when he's the only one here. And like, that's a challenging thing. And again, that's why I struggle with Vincent Price, because I just don't get that from him at all. Like I said, he throws a coffee pot once in frustration and then it's just like, no, I don't have time to be angry. And that's like all we get. And I just think there's more to it. And I mean, I'd argue the same thing with the Charlton Heston version. Again, the wrong person for the job, out of my cold dead hands. Like he's not the sort of person who is going to have any sort of emotive sense when it comes to the sole survivor of some form of an apocalypse.
Will Smith too. Will Smith was not like all three of these guys. I think were miscast if we're trying to stay allegiant to the source material. So who is it? Who could you believe?
That Matheson said that he would love to have seen Harrison Ford as the star and George Miller as the director. He said that would have been the ideal creative combination. Yeah,
I could totally get that. I would because we were talking about Moon earlier. I'd put Sam Rockwell in there too. I think he's kind of a Harrison Ford, a little bit younger.
I could see
kind of
Rockwell.
A player.
Yeah, I could see him doing it. Of younger,
and of course,
people,
I would put you in there too. Of course, I would believe every minute.
You just want to stick me into my own personal apocalypse. Take that.
Yeah, right. Finally, some quiet.
Jeez.
Oh, well.
All right. Any last thoughts about this one?
Fun movie, Andy. I'm glad we watched it. It was a good pick.
It's fun. I'm glad I've kind of seen these movies now. At some point, we will have to just talk about I Am Legend, just so we can have finished this series.
Of course.
Maybe we'll throw in one more, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I think for right now, we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Sandy Pierce, Be Still the Earth, When Mountains Move, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. Is this me?
And then I believe this is you.
In a world where memories of films fade like shadows at dawn, one threat looms larger than all the others. Cinematic amnesia, the silent killer that strikes without warning. The symptoms are everywhere. Victims report suddenly forgetting that actor's name, that one with that face who was in that thing that time. Dinner parties are destroyed by heated arguments over whether you've already seen a film, or that shameful confession, I think I fell asleep during Citizen Kane. And the most debilitating symptom of all, standing paralyzed in front of your television for 47 minutes, unable to choose what to watch while your popcorn grows cold and stale. Scientists at the Center for Cinematic Preservation have identified only one known cure: Letterboxd, the revolutionary system that allows you to track, rate, and review every film you've ever witnessed. But ordinary Letterboxd can only do so much against this relentless condition. That's why the experts have developed Letterboxd Pro and Patron, enhanced formulations scientifically engineered to combat advanced cases of film forgetfulness. With Letterboxd Pro, you'll gain access to the year-in-review statistics that experts call essential for understanding your viewing patterns. You'll remove all advertisements from your system. Your watch lists will be unlimited. Your film diary will feature advanced filtering capabilities previously unavailable to the general public. And for those with the most severe cases, those poor souls who started referring to movies as content and can't distinguish between Hitchcock and Hitchcock Presents, Letterboxd Patron delivers the ultimate protection. Personalized backdrop images to soothe the afflicted mind, all-access film statistics that would make the CDC jealous, and priority access to new features before the general population is even aware they exist. The infection is spreading. Don't wait until it's too late. Protect yourself and your loved ones today. Use the isolation code NEXTREEL when upgrading to Pro or Patron, and you'll be inoculated with a 20% discount on your first treatment. The NEXTREEL. That's NEXTREEL for 20% off your cinematic salvation. Remember, only you can prevent cinematic amnesia. Letterboxd Pro and Patron, because your film memories are too precious to lose. Side effects may include increased watching of foreign films with inscrutable endings, an uncontrollable urge to rate movies on a half-star system, developing strong opinions about aspect ratios, and mild addiction to reading reviews at 2 a.m. In rare cases, users have reported naming their children after Criterion Collection titles. Letterboxd is not responsible for the dissolution of friendships after you publicly gave their favorite movie 2 stars.
Wow, even throwing in the little note at the end there. That was great.
It's on the brain because Tommy did one for our All the Feelings ad, and I just wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was very good. I like that one person, that one movie, that one.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Sequels and remakes, Andy. Well, we've already kind of talked about it.
We've talked about the fact that this book has been adapted 3 times. There was the Omega Man in 1971 and I Am Legend in 2007. There was also the direct-to-video Asylum ripoff version called I Am Omega that also came out in 2007 as a way to try, stealing some bucks from the I Am Legend fan base. So we'll have to debate, is that one worth actually talking about if we want to fully finish this series?
I mean, we've done some bad movies on this show. I don't see why this would be any different.
It would be our first Asylum. That would be interesting. Yeah.
That'd be a treat.
On top of that, there was also a comic book miniseries version that had been created. So, there are other versions. There hasn't been per se an actual remake of this particular film, and there has been no sequel of any of them. But, there's variations out there that may or may not be worth checking out.
How to do it award season? Did you get any attention for anything at all?
Not at the time it came out, but in 2006, the Saturn Awards nominated for the best DVD collection, this Hammer Horror series. This was included in that, but it lost to the Bela Lugosi collection. That's it, though. It's not really a film that you expect to garner awards, Right.
Well,
it was funny though, because I was like, Hammer Horror, was this Hammer Horror?
No.
AIP, I don't know if they were just throwing stuff together to kind of like, maybe in the UK it was released. I don't know. I'm not sure how it ended up under the Hammer Horror banner for that particular release.
That is really strange, because my understanding was that this was the script was originally tossed to Hammer and it was rebuffed. And that's why they ended up going to Italy.
Yeah, because British censors wouldn't allow the film to be produced, so the producer sold it to AIP. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why this ended up being part of the Hammer Horror collection on that DVD. Maybe that's why it lost.
How did it do at the box office? Maybe that's why it lost, because it wasn't actually Hammer.
Because they said, what are you doing?
It took me a minute.
Yeah.
How did it do at the box office?
Well, for this first adaptation of Matheson's story, they had a budget estimated around $300,000, or just over $3 million in today's dollars, which honestly seems high when you think about it. Yeah.
Right.
The movie opened May 6th, 1964, opposite the Ingrid Bergman, Anthony Quinn film The Visit. Unfortunately, though, as an AIP film, there is just little beyond that. I have no idea how well this did other than this generic copy that I found. Although it was not considered a success upon its release, it later gained a more favorable reputation as a classic of the genre. So that's what I have. That's where we stand.
Well, that's not much, but
it isn't.
Good on you for trying. Well, again, I'm glad we talked about it. I think it's it's a fun movie. Did it transform me as a viewer? No, but am I glad it exists? Because I also got 28 Days Later and, all of the Dead movies. Yeah, I'm very glad that this was inspirational to others. So
yeah, I mean, huge inspiration, to, we already mentioned Romero. Stephen King has said that this film was inspiration for him when he was getting started. Like a lot of people have found this film to be something that is and was inspiring. So I think that's an important element of it. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll be right back for our ratings. But first, here's the trailer for next week's movie, kicking off our car racing series, the final series of our 14th season. It is John Frankenheimer's 1966 film, Grand Prix.
Oh, I can't wait for these movies. Every one of them I'm so excited about.
All right, you ready for this?
I'm so ready. Did we do the same thing?
No, we didn't. I liked how yours was kind of like Vincent Price, but kind of became Hannibal Lecter.
I don't have that many tools in the tool chest, Andy.
Well, mine is Vincent Price, but I am not going to even try. So it's just not going to happen. All right, here we go.
All right.
Hello, is anyone out there? This is Dr. Robert Morgan, broadcasting on all frequencies. I have some crucial information to share, something that's given me hope in these dark times. As you know, the world has been overrun by the undead. We're scattered, isolated, fighting every day just to survive. But in my solitude, I have found something that's reminded me of the power of human connection and the importance of art. It's a film podcast called The Next Reel. Now, I know what you're thinking. Films? In a world like this? But trust me, this isn't just any ordinary podcast. These people, they're not just talking about the latest blockbusters or the most popular movies. They're exploring cinema as a whole. Obscure films, international movies, genres I've yet to explore. Their passion for the media is truly inspiring. But it's not just about the films themselves. By becoming a member of The Next Reel, you gain access to a wealth of incredible content. Monthly bonus episodes that dive even deeper into the world of cinema, ad-free versions of every episode so you can enjoy the discussion without interruption, and perhaps most importantly, early access to each new episode so you can stay ahead of the curve and be part of the conversation as it's happening. It's a small thing in the grand scheme of things, just $5 a month or $55 for the year, but in a world where every day is a struggle, where every little bit of normalcy and entertainment is precious, it means everything. And let's not forget the community aspect. By joining The Next Reel, you're not just getting access to great content. You're becoming part of a community of film lovers, a place where you can gather, even in this disconnected world, to share your thoughts, your passions, your loves for cinema. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we're not alone. We're connected by the stories we love and the art we love. The stories we share and the art we love. So here's what I'm asking. Go to truestory.fm/join and become a member, not just for the bonus content or the ad-free episodes, but for the sake of art itself, for the sake of ensuring that the love of cinema endures even as the world around us crumbles, and for the sake of connection, of being a part of something larger than yourself. This is Dr. Robert Morgan signing off for now, but I'll be here every day, holding on to this glimmer of hope, hoping to hear from you, hoping that together we can keep the light of the silver screen burning bright. Stay safe out there, and remember, in the darkest of times, art endures, stories endure, and as long as we have that, as long as we have each other and The Next Reel, we have a reason to keep going.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Movies?
Oh my goodness.
That's good.
I had fun writing that one.
Letterbox, Andrew. Letterboxed. This is, this is where we assign our hearts and numbers to the movies that we watch on this show. And you can find us at letterbox.com/thenextreel. What are you going to do?
This was fun. I enjoyed it. It's, again, not what I would love to have somebody finally kind of create the definitive adaptation of the book. But for now, maybe that's just the book. Omega Man, I had given 2 stars, no heart. I'm going to give this 3 stars. And I'm torn. 3 stars and no heart. Do I still give it a heart? I'll leave it at 3 stars, no heart is where I'm going to sit with this one, I think.
I think, weirdly, you and I are exactly in the same place on this one. I was really debating with the heart. Do I heart it just because I like what it represents? I don't know that I'm ever coming back to this movie is the problem. Like, I've seen it now and I get it. And I think you've got a little bit of a, what's the coach's name that says all those things that are so smart but so dumb?
Oh, where they're all backward.
Yeah.
They
What's his name?
I know who you're talking about. I can't remember.
Well, what you said was the most definitive version, the most definitive adaptation of the book should actually just be the book. And I think that's maybe where I stand too. Maybe they just haven't hit it yet. And I look forward to when they do. But so far we're not there.
Yeah, we're not there. Oh, well. Maybe one day, but I just think that what happens is people see undead vampires and they just want to actually create that as opposed to just letting it be its own thing. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, that will average out to 3 stars and no heart over at our count at Letterboxd, which is at The Next Reel. You can find me there at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete there at Pete Wright. So what did you think about The Last Man on Earth? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
All right. So your favorite review so far. What are you going to do?
I went high. I went with a 5-star by Gabriella Riley. And this was exactly my thought when I heard this. Having a morning mantra of another day to live through, better get it started, is such a mood.
That is a mood of every era, I think. I went with Ale Watches Films, 3-star, who says, these poor infected had such low self-esteem. They couldn't look at themselves in the mirror. They were very astute about mirrors. Like that was pretty good. Mirrors were good.
Yes, very funny.
All right. Thanks, Letterboxd.